Okay, hi everybody, welcome. It's the end of September. We've had several very long months of advocating for the Fight for What Counts campaign. We even did the Transforming Education campaign throughout all of that. It's really a moment for us to celebrate right now and to transition to the next campaign, which is the End Poverty Challenge in October. So welcome everybody. Thank you for being here with us tonight on a nice Thursday evening. Let me just run through the usual housekeeping. The session is being recorded. Please stay on mute unless you're speaking. And there will be two designated Q&A sections, one after we celebrate the Global Fund and one after we talk about fundraising. And anytime you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat and we'll read it out when we reach the Q&A section. But you can also raise your hand, unmute and speak to us and turn on your camera if you want to. We love to see your face, but you're not obligated to do so, however. So today we're going to talk about the Global Fund investment. You get to ask your questions to Chris, and then we'll overview the End Poverty Challenge for October, including talking about the top fundraising best practices and common fears, because we know that fundraising isn't always the easiest thing to launch yourself into. And we'll always finish up with our EPIC method on how to communicate effectively, because it's not just effective when you're an advocate with a decision maker, you can use it on potential donors as well. And we'll finish up with the Q&A. Now, before we launch into all of that, however, I do want to recognize that tomorrow is Orange Shirt Day, Truth and Reconciliation Day. And we at Results Canada stand against all forms of oppression, including those in Canada. And so I encourage all of our volunteers and all of our staff to recognize that day and have a moment of reflection for issues with Indigenous people in Canada, past and present. We obviously have a really horrific history with residential schools, and that's why Orange Shirt Day exists. But whether or not you have a day off tomorrow, it's really important to think about the territory you live in and recognize what issues are happening in your locality as well. In the chat, we'll put where you can find more information about the territory where you live. And I personally am zooming in from Vancouver on the unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, while the head office of Results Canada is on unceded.
You seem to have frozen, Camille.
Did I hear that I froze? Oh no, I'm sorry. I'll let Chris continue with her presentation. I'm sorry that I froze. But please, if you could share in the chat where people can locate more information about the Indigenous territory where they live, that would be really great. Recognize Orange Shirt Day tomorrow. Thank you.
Well, Camille, you should be so sorry.
I am very sorry.
No, don't be silly. So, hi everyone. We are going to talk about the Global Fund win, but I actually was reflecting, and I just want to take some time to share a little bit about some thinking that I've done related just to the power of results and the power of you. So thanks for Camille. I'm really happy to be here today among so many friends to share some, of my personal reflections on the power of Results Canada. As you know, at Results, you know what we do. We advocate in support of proven solutions to address causes and mitigate the consequences of extreme poverty. That's a place where hunger and disease thrive, where the convergence of climate, now more than ever, climate crisis and COVID, create a breeding ground for both. But it's also a place where communities are strong, where parents love their kids like parents everywhere, want the best for them. It's a place where local capacity, ingenuity, and potential are generating, homegrown solutions, and where old models of colonial white saviorism are finally being called out and dismantled. And it's a place where, progress and partnership is possible, because poverty doesn't have to be permanent. That's really, in a nutshell, what Results is about. In so many instances, we have the remedies, we just need the political will. That's the heart of who we are. And it's at that nexus between a deep understanding of the challenges and a clear belief in the massive potential for hope and solution. And I apologize, because how many of you have heard me say that, those buzzwords, but the potential for hope and solution live, and that Results focuses its advocacy. And you've heard me say this too, because we believe that although the journey to a world free of poverty is long, we'll only get there if we take the steps and we advocate around that steps. And I think that's pretty powerful. It's a combination of idealism and pragmatism and really getting shit done. So I've been fortunate to have had a front row seat to some incredible advocacy wins over the years. Today, I'm going to dig into a bit of the recent Global Fund success because we need to celebrate that one. We're thanks to you and to advocates and allies, some of whom are on this call, and partners across the development sector. We just had a monumental, unbelievable, kick-ass advocacy win that will have tremendous impact in the world. But I'm going to talk about our Global Fund campaign because boy, oh boy, do we need to celebrate. But before I go there, I should say, I could have talked about some other globe-changing advocacy wins that Results and others have had a front row seat on. You know, I could have talked about the Muskoka Initiative for some of you long-timers who have been around for a while. It was a G7 initiative launched by Prime Minister Harper in 2010 that leveraged $1.2 billion from the Canadian government and $7 billion more from other donors, and ultimately led to 1.2 million lives saved. And then when it was renewed 5 years later, even more implications and ramifications in terms of impact. Results Canada worked on that campaign with the simple idea that Canada could be a leader on child survival. And we worked, and our volunteers worked for over a year. A conservative government choosing to champion the lives and well-being of the most marginalized women and children around the world at the height of a recession. People said it was impossible, and we did it. Actually, you did it. And I could have talked about the Charlevoix Initiative to educate girls in emergencies. You know, 7 years after Muskoka, Canada hosted another G7, another bold ask, different location, different station, different government. And the simple premise as Results sat with partners again, almost a year before that G7 initiative was being fermented, was that in crisis settings, schools were often the first things to close and the last to reopen. But here's what really moved me the most about that particular campaign. Today's generation of young people is the largest in history. Half the world's population is under 30. 9 out of 10 to 24-year-olds live in low-income countries, and the youth population is booming in some of the most volatile regions of the world. This massive wave of youth could be seen as a threat, or, and this is where Results sensibility, I think, shines, or it could be viewed as an opportunity to support a generation of young people who are equipped to transform not only their own lives and their own communities, but the world. Maybe they'll fix some of the damage that we've done. This time with Charlevoix, 400 million from Canada, that leveraged another 3.8 billion globally. You know, last week I was, coming full circle in one of those weird moments in life. I was asked to MC an event at the Permanent Mission on the margins of Unga, where we came together to celebrate the fact that 4 million more girls and women and boys are accessing education thanks to Charlevoix. People said it was impossible, and we did it. Actually, you did it. So that brings me to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. Arguably, as you guys know, because you've become the experts now, the most impactful global health instrument in the world. Their recent result report, which again, you know, set the tally of lives saved over the past 20 years at 50 million. What a campaign. Before we cut to the last page, let's go back to the opening chapters, and not only months ago, but actually years ago, because Results globally and other partners like One and others on the call, Grands, have been leading advocacy for the Global Fund through 7 replenishments. But this time, you know, we built a coalition of partners who came together, more than a dozen organizations, key partners in One and Grand, as I said, and so many others, some of whom are on this call. We allied with partners and fellow advocates working across donor countries, but also in countries most affected in Africa and Asia. In May, we came together for a week of action, over 90 volunteers and partners meeting with over 50 parliamentarians to till the soil of interest for good things to grow. We identified opportunities to raise the call, marching in pride parades in Toronto, drumming up social and media interest. We had all the right conversations with all the inside decision makers. You engaged in months of grassroots actions. We asked a lot of you, but that's because the stakes were high. Writing letters to the editor, publishing op-eds, reaching out to your MPs, writing letters to ministers, resulting in 50 politicians from all political stripes and both the House and the Senate signing a letter of support. You know, a number of us on the call showed up at the AIDS conference because we thought that was the moment where the announcement would happen. In force, we showed up in Montreal only to be disappointed, as you guys know, by the fact that Canada was a no-show. But then, and this is the important part of advocacy, always look for the open space and the opportunity. We leveraged that to put on more pressure for Canada to meet its full fair share. And then it happened. The day before the pledging conference, we got word that Canada would commit not only 1.2, but 1.21 billion to the Global Fund, its full share, fair share, that 30% increase that we had been calling for, with another 100 million to the fund for its critical COVID response mechanism to strengthen health systems. I have to be honest with you, I didn't think it was possible. Even an internal optimist like me, I really didn't think it was possible. So much so that I'll let you in a little bit of a secret that the team at Results knows. I called them when I found out to let them know, and we all hopped on this like Teams call, and I wept. Tears of joy for sure at the impact and the potential for impact, but also because that success is such an emblem. I'm getting emotional again because I'm me and I'm corny, but anyway, but also because that success is such an emblem of power of you and the power of results and our partners and the power of so many allies and orgs who come together and came together to make this happen. Again, people said it was impossible and we did it. Actually, you did it. So, you know, if you look at our website at Results, which is pretty great, by the way, Laura's on the call who manages it, you'll find language that reinforces the fact that we push for Canada to do its fair share in supporting cost-effective, proven, tangible, high-impact solutions and approaches that address extreme poverty. It's true. In a nuts and bolts way. I'm proud of our organization because we do a lot of heavy lifting on identifying those solutions and the remedies and refining and defining the ask, because good advocacy, sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. And then understanding where the levers of power are and then pulling those levers alongside all of you with finesse and smarts. And I'm also proud of the fact that our advocates have the smarts, hearts, and advocacy training and muscle needed to make it to the finish line on so many amazing wins. But really, you know, reading between the lines, Results is about the power of real people to stand in solidarity with others around the globe and say, we won't stand by in a world that where inequity is allowed to flourish. So it's time to stand for a world where we fight for what counts and we get the world that we need, not just the world we want. So that's it. I'm happy to respond to any questions about last week, about the weeks ahead of that or in advance of that. This is a chance to provide any sort of inside scoop or to hear from you. But with that, maybe back over to you, Camille.
Yeah, I want to encourage everybody either unmute and ask or write in the chat, but also if you have a favorite thing about Results, or I see a lot of very long-standing volunteers on the call as well. If you have a comment on one of the previous Global Fund replenishments you've experienced or anything at all, I really encourage you to share. This is a moment for us to celebrate you and what you've been doing. I'll give you a quick moment to write down while you think your thoughts through.
No questions. I inspired people into deep silence.
I see something from Minerva in the chat, actually.
Awesome.
Minerva asks, how did you encourage supporters to remain motivated after the Prime Minister didn't show up at the AIDS conference in Montreal? That was in July. That's
a terrific question. Man, we were also disappointed, weren't we? We really had pinpointed the AIDS conference as the moment you guys wrote letters, you tried to encourage the Prime Minister to show up. When it became clear that he wasn't going to show up, we thought, you know, at least we might sort of get some sort of pledge there. The AIDS conference was interesting. It wasn't, Minerva, you were there, because it became a story about who wasn't there, about the opposite of Canada as a leader in the world, but more as a laggard because of the visa issue and all of that sort of stuff. I think we were able to sort of spin the AIDS conference loss or the loss of an announcement there into opportunity. You know, I used to, I tell this story and so forgive me, but my daughter is old now, she's 26, but she used to play competitive soccer. And I remember when she was, when she was 12 or 13 and she had this coach. And I remember being at a practice one time and the girls were all lining up to kind of practice their field kicks or whatever it was. I don't even know what it's called. I wasn't really paying attention, but they were all lining up and every girl would get in the line and then they would kick the ball and it would hit the goalie right in the belly every single time. And finally, the coach said, stop looking at the goalie, look for the open space, because the empty space, the open space is where the opportunity lies. And I think what we were able to do was spin, and you were a big part of this, Minerva, and one, is to spin the AIDS conference into a real point of shame so that we could then push them to use that as a lever to be even more bold when they actually did show up at the replenishment, make the pledge. So I think it was like an open communication with volunteers and group leaders about that reality and sort of spinning and getting folks to write letters to the editor. So I think it's a result. I do think we try to kind of bring people along with us on the advocacy journal and look for those open spaces. But yeah, I don't think there's any magic solution to keeping people motivated. If anything, I need motivation too, and I get motivation from our volunteers. So you could ask any of them the same question.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to it because there are definitely several volunteers here on the call who really persevered. And when we get feedback that you've been doing these things, it does help us continue to help you. So it really is kind of a full circle kind of thing where our volunteers always surprise me and how always motivated they are to take action. So that's really great. I see Ainsley in the chat says she loves that story about the open space, and Courtney as well. And I also see a new question from Courtney. It says she's an advocacy newbie, so maybe it's an obvious question. There's no such thing as an obvious question. So what now? What are the next steps for us? How do we keep track of progress?
With the Global Fund Pledge and the commitment, or with like following the thread of that investment, or like what's next in terms of advocacy campaigning?
I think there was so much build up, and that day I was clicking on my work computer to make it look like I was online, but I was like secretly watching on my other computer.
Oh, I love that.
So there was so much excitement, like up to the final second, and that bloody break and the music, and it's all like the most horrendous day. But yeah. So we got there, and afterwards I kind of woke up the next morning and I was like, okay, now what? Like, how do we watch this money in action, if that makes sense? How do we see what we're doing?
So, I think we tend to choose issues and mechanisms that are proven, as you know, Courtney, and the Global Fund is one of the probably the most transparent, mechanisms on the planet in terms of its results reports and measuring impact and all of that. We actually, in terms of inside advocacy, we know lots of people in the Secretariat. If one of the things that we did during the campaigning, if everybody remembers, is we had Peter Sands, the head of the Global Fund, kind of speak and share some inspiration at a busy time for him, but right at the beginning of our week of action. So I think it's just about continually sort of, looking at those results reports and ensuring that things are happening, but also working with, partners who there's a very complex like board mechanism with the Global Fund. So there are times when we, with our results partners globally or with others, try to influence the Canadian government who has board seats to always make the Global Fund better. So as much as we advocate for resources for the Global Fund, we also sort of try to have some level of expertise with global partners to be able to influence them to always be better. The Global Fund that often is about engaging civil society in countries where we need to have civil society voices, like deciding where resources in the countries where Global Fund expenditures are made at the table. Their CCM mechanism and the mechanisms that they have are pretty good. They're probably some of the best, but they can always be better. So there is that sort of thread along the way. But that's, I hope that's an answer to your question.
I see some agreement in the chat regarding the music. It was quite something to watch, especially as we were waiting for Canada's turn to pop up.
It's hard
Ava,
to figure out what was really happening behind the scenes. Somebody was
Yeah.
late or got stuck in traffic or something, but in any event, yes.
but it was nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I'll read you
Can I also say this though? Sorry, just to follow up on that. We're not quite done. There is, the Global Fund, even though we hit our fair share of the 1.2, which I'm really thrilled about, because again, I didn't think it was, I'm gonna be honest, I dreamed it was possible and we never were unrelenting advocates throughout the course of until we secured those resources. But the UK didn't show up, Italy didn't show up. And so we ended up, the Global Fund's overarching envelope of what it determined was needed as a baseline, and that's why everybody was asked in the G7 to increase by 30%, got to about 14 billion as opposed to 18 billion. So we're a little short. And the UK didn't commit, in part because the Queen had passed away, in part they just have a new prime minister, but she's a very right-leaning prime minister. And so there is efforts afoot, in our grassroots to global or inside threat advocacy with results partners there in the UK, because you are part, as volunteers of results, a global network to try to figure out how we might influence Prime Minister Trudeau to use some like health diplomacy or political capital to encourage that the UK steps up. But really, they're not done yet. So the Secretariat isn't done yet. They've got some more work to do to kind of ensure that people actually pay up over the course of the next couple of months.
I'll read you out the next question. It's from Ava, who's not a volunteer yet, by the way. She is a prospective fellow for the 2023 cohort. She says hi. What challenges did you encounter in building the coalition, and how did it change or reinforce past efforts and results?
Well, I mean, I can't imagine, there were no challenges. I mean, I know that sounds Pollyanna, but we've kind of, there weren't a lot of egos around the table. We worked so closely. And again, I know Minerva's on this call, but we work so closely. I guess Results Canada and One in Canada really helped, coordinate the coalition, but everybody did their share of 14 organizations. And so, early on, really early on, and that's the biggest part, one of the bigger parts of advocacy is figuring out what the ask is. I said this in my notes, but you think it's simple, but it's not always simple. We have to kind of weigh, because the Secretary of the Global Fund says Canada should invest an additional 30%, we have to weigh it against other asks. We have to think about there's all sorts of things to kind of consider. In the end, ultimately, we went for the big ask, knowing that it was going to be a heavy lift. And it just shows you shouldn't lower your ambition. You should just kind of dream big, because sometimes you succeed. But One was an amazing partner. The grants were an amazing partner. Stop TV Canada was amazing. There was a number of organizations. We would have bi-weekly calls, I think, or throughout, came together at the Pride parades, came together at sort of other opportunities, sometimes did our own thing, sometimes, amalgamated efforts. I mean, that's the best part of coalition work. It doesn't always work like that, but I can honestly tell you that in this instance, it was a dream team where people checked their egos at the door and really wanted to lift each other up in terms of supporting one another's advocacy, because, and that's our approach. It's always our approach at Results to try to do that. So just like we do with our volunteers and try to support that, want to support other partners to be, exceptional in their own way to the degree that they ever need us to support that. Yeah,
If anybody else has a
Pollyanna, but I don't mean to.
If there's any other questions, please write it now, because otherwise I will close with a really good comment from Sherry. I'm always happy when Sherry writes her impressions in the comments. Sherry's been with us for a long time, and she writes, "This is my third Global Fund replenishment, and we were ultimately successful each time. The product sells itself with our help. The fund is so successful. And although this time they kept us on tenterhooks until the last moment," and that's true, because Sherry's right. This was by no means in the bag. And this is why Chris cried. It's because we didn't expect necessarily to reach the goal that we did. But ultimately, it just proves that the advocacy was successful. Do you want to comment on that, Chris?
Well, it proves that your advocacy was successful. I said it during my piece. So, again, I think that's a great way to put it. We were on tenterhooks. And I mean, I'll just another little bit of inside gossip, because we're family, is that I was moderating this thing with the minister the day before, and we had kind of got word that something was happening, but they weren't kind of telling us the number, and it was getting frustrating. And the minister came in with his senior staff, and I literally tackled them, particularly the senior staff, and said, "My heart can't take it. I'm old. Please tell me what's going on." And he sort of mouthed what the pledge was and what the commitment was. So, you know, I feel like decisions were being made literally right to the last minute. I actually, you know, the other thing that happened was, you know, again, open space, so interesting. Sorry to believe, but the prime minister, like the pledging conference was supposed to happen on the Monday, which was the first day of Parliament. You know, there's a new Conservative leader in Parliament during question period. Was Trudeau going to actually go to the UNGA to the pledging conference, make it in time to actually stand on stage? An announcement that big, you know, knowing that the prime minister was going to make it was a strong signal that it was going to be that big, because otherwise he might have not have been the one to show. The fact that it got delayed by a few days, and, you know, frankly, they were all in the UK for, I guess, singing around the piano, but also doing other things in terms of the sad day when the Queen was laid to rest. But I'm sure there was other conversations that were happening too in terms of, you know, pledging moments. I really think ultimately that decisions were made to the very last minute. And I will also say that the resources, and we need to do a little bit of, Courtney, to your point about following up, is that we also understand that the additionality, because they were looking at, I think, $1 billion out of ODA resources, that additionality to get to the 1.2 had to come out of the Prime Minister's own Strategic Initiatives Fund. So it is a coveted pot of money that is usually only used for like G7 initiatives, but that's what had to happen. So there's a lot of stuff that was going on behind the scenes, but I'm so grateful and glad that we planted together. We tilled the soil for good things to grow. We were unrelenting, and ultimately, you know, we won big impact for the world. So you should all be really, 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 really proud of yourselves. And we should like big claps.
Big round of applause, virtual or physical, whatever you prefer.
Pop the virtual champagne.
Thank you so much, Chris, for all of your thoughts. Thank you, everybody who commented and asked questions. This is really your big win, and we're really, really pleased by the result. And it's the perfect segue to where we're going next. The month of October, just like last year, is our End Poverty Challenge. It's a fundraising month. It's a month for us to really focus in on what results advocates do, the power of advocacy, and I'll let Chris explain a little bit why it's so important to fundraise for an organization like Results.
Yeah, I feel like we've hooked you on the big impact, but I do want to say, so in October, that is our fundraising month. We, you know, a couple of years ago, we looked at on October 17th as International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, for an organization whose mission is to create the political will to end extreme poverty. It was a day that sort of felt like it was unmarked. So we wanted to sort of build out around it. This year, we're actually doing some stuff with parliamentarians on the Hill, trying to get them to film some sort of recordings around IDEP, as it's called. But we're also, you know, we dedicate October to, you know, an experiential fundraiser. Why it matters? It matters because, as you know, Results Canada doesn't accept government funding. We have no government funding. So everything that we do is through friends and family fundraisers, through monthly donors, which provides like that critical unrestricted funds for us to kind of, you know, grow our grassroots and do that kind of meaty work that really matters in terms of a volunteer organization that wants to light more and more people up to the power of advocacy and to be a part of big wins and to be a part of big hope and solutions. So our fundraising, this fundraising moment is really important in terms of not only providing, literally keeping the lights on in organizations, nonprofit organizations like Results, so that we work in the light, but also supporting us to kind of have some latitude and some leeway to apply resources to kind of the innovative things that we really want to do. And this year, we're really wanting to focus in on, I think Camille will share some more on this, on getting the word out. So growing our volunteer base and supporting our volunteers in key strategic areas and ridings, building out our volunteers so that we can have even more impact in the world. So yeah, that's really, maybe I'll just leave it at that, but just to sort of say, the other thing about an experiential fundraiser like IDEP, and there's lots of opportunities for latitude in terms of we're not restrictive, but it is really about, and Kimmy will get into this, about walking literally in the shoes of partners around the world, is to be able to tell the story of who we are as well. And again, I think it's an entry point to light people up and to invite them into our work. You know, the last thing I'll say maybe about fundraising and why I, a long time ago, stopped thinking about fundraising for results as an ask. I thought about it as a gift because, you know, I know what results has done for me. I hope many of you on the call who have been advocates, who have been a part of big wins, know that when you hear that inner applause about pushing yourselves to be bold and learning and be a part of something big, that it really, I got goosebumps, but it really does light you up. So this affords an opportunity to invite more people into our story. Not everybody will be an advocate, but they can support our advocacy through making a pledge. So with that, maybe I'll leave it back to you, Camille, to sort of share more as the call goes on about the specificities of the campaign, but I'm doing it. I hope you'll join me. It really is so critical. It makes all of the difference. Yeah, would love to for you to join us in that campaign.
Thank you, Chris. And before I go into all the specificity, we've got Norm on the call who did this fundraiser last year, the End Poverty Challenge 2021. And so I'll pass the mic on to Norm to tell us his experience.
Hi, everyone. I think I'll start just very quickly saying 5.5 years ago, my friend Larry Liddell invited me out to a meeting. And I came and I've been coming ever since. And the reason I've been coming ever since is because this actually works. And it's worked repeatedly. I can remember, I think, 2 Global Fund wins, as well as the Charlevoix Declaration, which was probably the first big one for me, where I saw the impact we were doing. And why is fundraising important? Well, as advocates, we already know why what we advocate for is important. I think we all know that here. But the thing to remember is we have this amazing staff at Results that are doing a lot of the background work, setting up the website, policy work, people, parliamentarian officers, people doing all sorts of works behind the scenes to help volunteers, including the fellowship program. And so that's why this is really important. And so last year I participated in the challenge, and 6 kilometers is the average distance that men or women and children predominantly walk each day to get water. And so last year I decided I was going to walk 3 kilometers each weekday and 10 kilometers each weekend day from October 9th to 31st to raise money. And what was my favorite part? Well, this is kind of a guilty secret, but I like watching the numbers go up, to be honest, as pledges are coming in, and it kind of feels good because you realize that that money is going to go to something important. So I think it's a really great challenge, and it's really important. So I encourage people to participate.
Thank you, Norm. You were one of the top fundraisers last year, if I remember correctly. So thank you so much for everything you did for us last year. And I hope you participate again this year as well. Now, Chris, I know you were not feeling too good today. So if you want to go now, I will take care of the rest of the group and we can talk about the specificities of fundraising and how we can do it. But thank you for talking, and thank you as well, Norm, for sharing with the group.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
She's a great trooper for being with us today. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk a little bit more about the End Poverty Challenge. Okay, so Chris was talking about IDEP. IDEP stands for the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. That's on October 17th. It's basically a day that we looked at and thought nobody's doing anything with it. And it really encompasses the whole of our work. Over the years, the kinds of topics and results would cover has changed, but ultimately it was always about ending extreme poverty in low and middle income countries. And so that is the day that we're anchoring this fundraiser on. And we're doing it for the whole month of October, not just the actual 17th. Now, the two actions that we have on our call to action this month are fundraising, peer-to-peer fundraising, which means that you create your little fundraiser page and you share it with friends and family. It doesn't matter what goal you set for yourself, if it's high or it's low. It's really as long as you help us, you participate, and you get the word out. This is the main thing that we're asking you to do. It's the most important thing that you can do for results this October, and we only do this once a year. We won't ask you to fundraise any other time of year. But there is a secondary action which does also help us build the movement for results, and that is inviting others to join results. So basically recruiting other volunteers to join. And the objective of this whole month, raise awareness, because when you're raising funds, even when you're unsuccessful with a potential donor, you're still raising awareness. You're still having discussions. We want to raise 15,000. That was our goal last year, and we beat it. We ended up at 17,000. That was really awesome. And the last objective is bringing in more advocates. So again, either it's by recruiting people, or if a potential donor says, I don't have the money, but I have the time, by all means, bring them into results, because more advocates equals more impact. Now, I'll show you on my screen, you see the homepage of our website. This is our call to action. And you see here, these are the two little bubbles, the fundraise and the invite others. But first, I want you to go to the main call to action page, because everything that Chris talked about tonight, the power of advocacy, why advocacy is important, why we should talk about it with our peers, why should we talk about pessimism with our peers, and why advocacy matters in actually creating change. All of that is laid out for you to read and take a little inspiration from before you go and talk to your potential donors or potential new volunteers. We also have some key dates at the bottom here that you can use in your fundraising campaign. You can sort of have little touch points on these specific dates to say, hey, today's World Mental Health Day, and I want to check in with you on the state of the world, for example. I'm going to start with the second action here, the inviting others to results, because then we're going to talk exclusively about fundraising, because again, the fundraising is really the most important thing that we want to do this month. Raising resources is important, as Chris already explained. So if I go under inviting others to results, you'll see that we have a little two-step process for you to do this. One is you can fill out a form, so we build a beautiful graphic for you. You can see an example with my own face right now. And the second step is to kind of round up your recruitment campaign. So we have a little toolkit here with several options for you to go on social media, talk one-on-one with people, find bulletin boards in your libraries, things like that. I really do encourage you, if you're doing this action, to build this out like a mini campaign for yourself. Maybe just a couple of social media posts are always helpful, but I really, really encourage you to make it an event. Now, I'll let you read that on your own time, and let's just go to the fundraising, because that's the scarier but most impactful part of this month. Over here, you'll see the first two buttons you'll see. One is create my fundraiser page, and the other one is the toolkit. The toolkit, I'll let you look at it on your own time, but it has templates to ask for donations. It has top tips, a lot of things that you can go through. But right now, I just want to show you how to build your fundraiser page, because that's step number one. So if I click on this, it brings me to the End Poverty Challenge 2022 main page. As you'll see, there's already a $25 donation from my cat, Harold. But here, right here below Harold, you see create my own fundraiser page. This is what you would click to get started. You put your name, your email, and then you receive an email from Donor Perfect. And in that email, you have a little button that says customize my fundraiser page. It's very, very easy once you go to your fundraiser page. In fact, I think I had that email ready and out to show you. I do. Pardon me while I open this. This is the email you get.
I think these
So that's not going to lead them to right here. You'll see right down here, this is the link that you can use to show your page to people. So you'll see again, this is my cat's donation. Did I break up again? Am I still frozen?
Just a second.
Let me know when I'm unfrozen.
You're good. You're good. now.
Okay, awesome. I really apologize, everyone. I'm not sure why for the last 2 days my internet's been like this. This here is what your fundraising page looks like. It's pretty straightforward. You have your goal here that you can set for yourself. I set $100 for myself. You can set 200, you can set 1,000. It's really up to you. Here you'll see your donors, and here you can put your own picture. And here is where I wrote what challenge I'm undertaking here. And that down here is where my potential donors can go and donate. So it's really that simple. You put in your name and email, you get an email, you customize your page, and you share this page widely with your donors. There's a lot more tools that you can dig into on our website. It's not necessary for me to go through them at this very minute. However, I will take a moment to, when I say that I have a hook here, this is basically where Results has 3 focuses, one on health equity, one on education, and one on economic opportunity. We've given you 3 examples of people who fit into those categories here. And we encourage you, although it's not mandatory, we encourage you to pick one that really appeals to you and set your challenge to what they wrote. So I picked health equity because we've got the story of Zareen here, who delivers polio drops to 120 houses a day in hard to reach areas. And so I've committed in my fundraising challenge to walk 120 minutes a day. So I decided to make something symbolic because it's catchy. That's what we encourage you to do, but we do have other volunteers that last year they fundraised for their birthday or graduation, things like that. And that's also more than acceptable if you prefer. All right, let me go back to our slides. So just quick recap, you pick your goal, like walking 6 kilometers a day, or in my case, 120 minutes a day. Whatever challenge works for yourself or your life. You pick your goal, like $100, $200 or more. You set up your page, and then you get started. So by getting started, we mean have deep discussions with your peers. So your closest peers, one-on-one talks about what they think of international development. Do they think ending poverty is possible? Are they pessimistic about the state of the world? But where do they think Canadian aid money should go? And you can have all of these discussions and kind of bring it all the way back to you volunteer with Results because you see the value in advocacy and you feel that we push the government to spend their international assistance envelope in the most cost-effective and impactful ways. That's in a nutshell what you're doing with your closest peers, but you can also share on social media. In fact, we really encourage you to
I think the is frozen, so you can
take pictures,
in the
yeah, including my
meantime-
donation link here so close.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I break up again?
Yes, I was telling everyone to put their questions in the chat in case
Where did I stop?
on social media.
On social media? Okay. We encourage you to share what you're doing on social. So for example, I would be walking and I would be including my donation link just to reach those peers of yours who might not be close enough for you to have a one-on-one discussion. And we will actually be giving a prize to the greatest social media butterfly. So really do share on social media. But you can get really creative. For example, if you're walking, running, wheeling, you could end at an MP's office, at your MP's office, and you could ask them if you could meet at a certain time and do a photo op with them. You could invite potential donors to experience advocacy. Yeah, you could teach them how to write a letter to the editor, how to write to their member of parliament, about anything really. That's something that you can do and then ask them to donate. You could formalize that and have a whole letter to the editor workshop. You could host a movie, like a documentary screening, or personally, my favorite idea is coordinate a group. You're in groups for a reason. You could easily organize an event where you bring all of your potential donors all together and give them that kind of experience where you teach them how to write a letter to the editor. Now, this isn't mandatory. It's just how to get creative and push the envelope. And if you do that, there's a price for that too. So tell us if you did a special event or something like this, because we'd love to know. Okay, now I've been hyping up the fundraiser, but I know people have fears. So let's talk about them. But before I head into that, I would like to reassure you that I have secured hundreds of monthly donors for another organization. And these common fears, they're common for a reason. They're easy to get in your way, but really, at the end of the day, it's you getting in your own way because they're very easy to get over. Let me dig into them. The biggest one is I don't know if they can afford it. And my answer to that is you don't know until you ask. And if you're the person who worries if people can afford it, you're also the person who is not pushy. You're also the person who is very gentle with your ask. So you don't really need to worry about that one so much. Let people decide for themselves because the worst thing they can say is no. And people can surprise you. You really don't know the donation portfolio of your peers. And people, when they donate, they do like to have a diversified portfolio of donations. And if they don't donate to advocacy yet, that's something really exciting that people actually do really love to add to their donations. You'd be really surprised. I don't want to seem pushy. It's a good segue, isn't it? Because those two really go hand in hand. First of all, you're probably not pushy. Second of all, a lot of people will be a maybe, and you might not realize it if you're not actively listening. So when you're having these discussions one-on-one with your peers, I want you to identify who's a yes, that's easy. Who's a maybe, they have a question, maybe an objection, maybe they want to think about it, and who's a hard no. So a hard no is they're giving you kind of an excuse that is, just don't even ask me about it. Like, like, don't bother me with this. By asking follow-up questions, by figuring out really where the hesitation lies, you'll be able to tell who's a maybe and who's a no. The maybes, it's important to follow up with them. It sounds pushy to ask twice, but think about in your own life, if you have to do a transaction of some sort or you have to pay a bill of some sort, you're going to procrastinate it. And so when you've identified a maybe person in your life, a maybe donor, asking them again in a few weeks' time, it's just a gentle reminder, but it can actually make the difference between no donation and a donation because they actually want to do it and they just need a bit of time and it's sunk into their brain. And you reminding them helps them do that life admin that they wouldn't do otherwise. Now, the next one is, I feel very unprepared to answer questions. First of all, if you feel super unprepared, reach out to action@resultscanada.ca and we can help you. You can have a one-on-one coaching session with me, absolutely. But you don't have to know all the answers. In fact, if somebody's asking a lot of questions and you don't know the answer to them, then you've got yourself a maybe donor. And that's a positive thing as we've established in fear number 2. Say you don't know, say you'll get back to them and you've actually got a really nice sort of agreed upon second touch point to ask for a donation again once you have the answers. And the last one is, I don't know if it's a good time to fundraise. This or that is happening right now in the world. I don't know if it's appropriate. And if that's your fear, good on you for being conscientious. It is important to think about the context, think about who you're asking, but it shouldn't let that stop you because really what we're asking for you to do is to have discussions about the state of the world. And it might end up being a long discussion that takes a lot of tangents. And that's actually a positive thing. And it doesn't matter if they don't end up donating, but you'll know a lot more about your potential donor, about your peer. And I trust all of our volunteers to be very respectful about it. There's no reason why the state of the world, other issues, what's happening in Iran, climate change, anything should really get in your way of fundraising for something that you care about. Now, the biggest one is just an internal fear. I'm just afraid of asking for money, generally speaking. And we've got a lovely quote from a longtime volunteer, Rochelle, who says, I fundraise for results because every dollar goes to an organization that's unlocked millions of dollars to improve girls' education, strengthen global health systems, and address the root causes of poverty around the world, while supporting Canadians with skill-building opportunities to become powerful and engaged advocates right here at home. Can you think of a better value for a hard-earned dollar? So you can see Rochelle really has bought into it. She understands that this is valuable and that the money is going to a good place. If you're really, really afraid of asking for money, again, I encourage you to reach out. We can talk through your fears. But really, again, the worst thing is that somebody might say no, and that's it. Now, We do have an EPIC method. Oh, sorry, Courtney, actually, I'll answer your question now before I move on to how to structure your pitch.
When we were doing the chalking downtown Toronto
Yes.
at the waterfront, one of the questions that I wasn't prepared for, but I should have been, or one of the comments that we got, because we got a lot of attention. Who knew drawing on a sidewalk could start conversations, right? I guess you guys know. People that, that concern about, well, I used to donate to these kind of organizations, but you give $50 and by the time it goes all the way down the funnel, only 3 of your dollars are actually reaching the people who really need it, and the rest are used for administrative costs and paying salaries and that kind of stuff. And I really wasn't sure how to approach that. I wasn't prepared to deny it. But I didn't have a good answer.
Yeah, that's totally fair. In that case, that person is most likely talking about an implementing organization. So, the sort of the Plan Canada and the Oxfams of the world. So they're wondering, because for those organizations, you're giving money to have a project on the ground, and part of it goes to administration. And yes, it's a concern for some donors, which is why all those organizations usually keep it to something like 10% to reassure their donors. And others will actually get a major donor to cover just the admin cost. So a major donor that understand that it's a turnoff for regular donors to do so.
Oh, wow.
And that's really interesting. But I would often say, I understand it's a turnoff, but administration needs to happen if we want the programs to run effectively.
You have to
and
run
when
the
it comes,
program.
yeah, you have to run the program. And for results, really, it's all, in a sense, it's not admin cost in the way that they were referring to, but these funds are going to expanding a volunteer network. It really is going to building tools, creating videos, maybe having a consultant to work on anti-oppression, things like that, that are very operational. So yes, if you're donating to results, it's quite operational, but it has a bit of a, an effect.
You don't
Yeah.
operate.
Yeah, so it creates basically more advocates who create more impact, because the more advocates we have, the more members of parliament are aware. I would really focus on, again, that's why we focus on the power of advocacy. When I was getting a bunch of monthly donors for this other organization, I definitely sold it on the power of advocacy alone, because, hey, you can donate to a program building, but you can also donate to pester the government. And that is very, very appealing to a lot of people, believe me. So that's something you can explain. Using the Global Fund as an example, because that's a big win that wasn't going to happen.
A lot of people, I think.
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you for asking the question. It is a really common thing that comes out. Okay, I'm going to quickly give you our little EPIC method to communicate your donation pitch really well. This is a conversation starter. It's meant to be really short, and it's meant to open up to new questions, to objections, to tangents. This is really just to get your whole point across really fast, so that you're not kind of reeling it back in the conversation to bring it back to donations. You want to get it out of the way at the very beginning. So EPIC, it's engage, problem, inform, and call to action. So engage is like a bang statement. Problem is, here's what we're facing. Inform about the solutions is, here's what we're proposing to resolve this problem. And call to action is, what do I want you as an individual in front of me to do? So for the donations, the call to action is, I want you to donate, basically. Making it personal is the best thing you can do, making it impactful, and making it really, really short. I can't emphasize this enough. Keep it as short as you possibly can, because people interrupt, and that's normal. You really want to get all the way to your call to action so that they have a whole picture before you really start answering questions. I'll give you an example. So as a volunteer with results, our advocacy really set out to focus on COVID-19, but we find it clear now that that wasn't the only problem with the pandemic. Progress towards ending extreme poverty really has been kicked into reverse by convergence of crises like COVID, but also climate and also conflict. And in many ways, we can make change happen, but there's a bunch of ways to do that. One is throwing money to the problem. One is changing policies. And the other, which I'm going to talk about, is building the political will to do both of those. That's what we call advocacy. It's people talking to the government about putting more cost-effective money towards the problem and improving the policies. Now, Results volunteers have been doing that. We've been talking to Canadian decision makers for a long time about the solutions that do exist to end extreme poverty globally. And so we're standing in solidarity with everybody living in extreme poverty this month for the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And right now I'm taking part in a fundraiser to raise funds to grow Results Canada's volunteer network to make that impact. And so I'm asking you to donate to my End Poverty Challenge to create a stronger, healthier, and more equitable world. Now, what's funny is that I didn't write this epic and I find it too long as I was saying it. I really suggest that you practice it in front of the mirror and get it down to as close to a really short elevator pitch as you possibly can. But using this structure will help you organize your thoughts in a way that's compelling to most audiences. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, this is my last slide. I promise you're almost done with your evening. Speaking from the heart is really the most important. And I've got a quote from Anita here, who is the group leader in the Victoria group. And she's thanking her lucky stars for the life she has. And she thinks of all those who don't have it as easy, but with Results, she feels like she can undercut all that cynicism and despair about the state of the world. And she uses her privilege to drive change. And that really does motivate her. If you heard that from somebody asking you for funds for the organization you volunteered with, I'm sure that in a lot of cases, it would be quite convincing. So speak really from your experience, from the heart, from what you care about. So it's not as much about a script as much as what is in your own brain and your own heart. Are there any questions about how to fundraise, anything at all that I covered this evening? Super clear. I will stop sharing my screen in that case. Okay, show of hands, who's going to fundraise? Where's my hand? Awesome. Well, if there's no questions from the group, I will stay back for a few minutes. If you need a little bit of technological help with creating your fundraiser page, I'm happy to stay back and help you. But otherwise, you're free to go and have a really great evening, and I'll see you in October.
Sanaya is going to fundraise as well. So we have someone. Thank you, Sanaya. Snana. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Yeah.